Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to the daily Bhagavata class. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, titled Viduras Talks with Maitreya, verse number 7. क्रीडन् विदत्ते द्विजगो सुराणां क्षेमाय कर्माणि अवतराभेदै मनो न तृप्यति अपि शृण्वतां नः श्लोकमौलिश्चरितामृतानि. Word to word translation: Kridan, manifesting pastimes; Vidhatte, he performs; Dvija, twice born; Go, cows; Surana, of the demigods; Kshemaya, welfare; Karmani, transcendental activities; Avatara, incarnations; Bhedai, differently; Manaha, mind; Na, never; Tripyati, satisfies; Api, in spite of; Shrinvatam, continuously hearing; Naha, our; Shushloka, auspicious; Maule, of the Lord; Charita, characteristics; Amritani, undying. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Arvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: You may narrate also about the auspicious characteristics of the Lord in His different incarnations for the welfare of the twice born, the cows, and the demigods. Our minds are never satisfied completely, although we continuously hear of His transcendental activities. Purport: The Lord appears in this universe in different incarnations, like Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Nrsimha, and He manifests His different transcendental activities for the welfare of the twice born, the cows, and the demigods. The Lord is directly concerned with the twice born or civilized men. A civilized man is one who has taken his birth twice. A living entity takes birth in his mundane world due to the union of male and female. A human being is born due to the union of the father and mother, but a civilized human being has another birth by contact with the spiritual master, who becomes the actual father. The father and mother of the material body are so only in one birth, and in the next birth, the father and the mother may be a different couple. But the bona fide spiritual master, as the representative of the Lord, is the eternal Father, because the spiritual master has the responsibility to lead the disciple to spiritual salvation, or the ultimate goal of life. Therefore, a civilized man must be twice born, otherwise, he is no more than the lower animals. The cow is the most important animal for developing the human body to perfection. The body can be maintained by any kind of foodstuff, but cow's milk is particularly essential for developing the finer tissues of the human brain, so that one can understand the intricacies of transcendental knowledge. A civilized man is expected to live on foodstuffs comprising fruits, vegetables, grains, sugar, and milk. The bull helps the agricultural process of producing grain, etc. And thus, in one sense, the bull is the father of the humankind. Whereas the cow is a mother, but she supplies milk to human society. A civilized man is therefore expected to give all protection to the bulls and cows. The demigods, or the living entities who live in the higher planets, are far more superior to human beings, since they have better arrangements for living conditions. They live far more luxuriously than human beings, yet they're all devotees of the Lord. The Lord incarnates in different forms, such as those of a fish, a tortoise, a hog, and a combined lion and man, just to give protection to civilized man, the cow, and the demigods, who are directly responsible for the regulative life of progressive self-realization. The whole system of the material creation is planned so that the conditioned souls may have the opportunity for self-realization. One who takes such advantage of such an arrangement is called a demigod or civilized man. The cow is meant to help maintain such a high standard of living. The Lord's pastimes for the protection of twice-born civilized men, the cows, and the demigods are all transcendental. A human being is inclined to hear good narration and stories, and therefore, there are so many books, magazines, and newspapers on the market to satisfy the interests of the developed soul. But the pleasure in such literature, after it is read once, becomes stale. and people do not take any interest in reading such literature repeatedly. In fact, newspapers are read for less than an hour and then thrown into the dustbins as rubbish. The case is similar with all other mundane literatures. But the beauty of transcendental literatures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is that they never become old. They have been read in the world by civilized men for the last 5,000 years, and they have never become old. They're ever fresh to the learned scholars and devotees, and even by daily repetition of the verses of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no satiation for devotees like Vidura. Vidura might have heard the pastimes of the Lord many, many times before he met Maitreya, but still he wanted the same narrations to be repeated because he was never saturated by hearing them. That is the transcendental nature of the Lord's glorious pastimes. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kancha Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Before I start off, I'd like to apologize to all the devotees today. I think as per schedule, it was Premanand Mataji. So I'm sorry to disappoint you all by being here, trying to kind of discuss Bhagavatam in her place. I'm sure she would have done an excellent job than what I can do in many times. So, but again, thank you to Lakshmikant Prabhu for giving me this opportunity. And this is one glorious thing that I take pleasure from the time I moved to this community. So thank you everyone for always joining in these classes and encouraging us. So let's leave the translation just once more, and then we'll try to discuss some points that I thought are kind of interesting. Translation. You may narrate also about the auspicious characteristics of the Lord in his different incarnations for the welfare of the twice born, the cows, and the demigods. So as I was reading this, and many times as we also see, there is this questions and then allegations, if I can call it that way, for the lack of better term, that come up where many people claim to say that there is some kind of discrimination that the Lord shows, where, as it kind of also says, is this different incarnations are for the welfare of twice born, the cows, and the demigods. So just let's try to discuss using some maybe some pastimes and also some verses across various scriptures that we have, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and also Bhagavad Gita, to see if in fact is it true that the incarnations and the activities that Lord performs, is it only for the welfare of the twice born, cows and demigods, or is it actually for everybody, as it says in Namo, like the verse that we all repeat every day, Namo Brahmana Devaya, Go Brahmana Itaya Cha, Jagat Itaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namah. Like as it says, Namo Brahmana Devaya, my obeisances to the Lord, who is Go Brahmana Itaya Cha, who is the caretaker of Go and Brahmana. But again, it also says he is also the Jagat Hitaya. He is also the benefactor or the well-wisher of the entire world. So it's not that Lord is, it's not a bracket that we can just fit Lord where he is only taking the care of the Brahminical class of the people and the cows. And as it says in this the verse, it's not just also refined, like confined within the boundaries of cows, demigods, and the Brahminical class of people. And also, if we go back into the Ramayana, there is this famous verse which is kind of solace for, I'm sure, for many of the devotees, and it's obvious also quite an important verse for me, is Sakrit eva prapanno yas tavasviti chayyachate abhayam sarvada tasmai dadami etad Vratam Mama. So this is the Vratam, the pledge that Lord Ramachandra is taking. This happens during the pastime when Vibhishana comes to take shelter of the Lord, and then the whole discussion happens between Sugriva, Hanuman, Ramachandra, Vibhish, I think Jambava, and everybody says their own points on why they should take Vibhishana into consideration and why they should not take. And finally, Lord Ramachandra confirms what is his view. In that he says, "It is my pledge," and it's not his opinion or something. He is saying, "It is my pledge. It is his vratam. It is my pledge that if anyone just once sincerely petitions me for shelter, saying I am yours, then I grant him courage for all the time to come." So, in connection to this, I was also once hearing from um, Amarendra Prabhu. He was saying that I'm not sure the exact source of this pastime, but when Ramachandra was in his Vanavas, every time he used to walk, there is this thorns that used to bite in, hurt his knees and hurt his legs. And every time when Lakshmana or Mother Sita were trying to take it out, he used to say that because I've taken this pledge of anybody who takes shelter of my lotus feet, I cannot let them go. She would never take out even the thorns. So if Lord Ramachandra is definitely taking his word very serious. So it's not the case that where is just, and nowhere in this verse, Lord Ramachandra, or even in the glorification of Krishna of that, it says Jagad Hitaya. So he's the well-wisher and the benefactor, and he's ready to give shelter for everybody. So do we consider, which statement is it true? Is it true the statement of the Bhagavatam, where Vidura, and definitely whatever is there in Bhagavatam, we know at least theoretically is true. And the statements of Vidura cannot be false, that the different incarnations are for the welfare of twice born, the cows and demigods. And on the other hand, we have these statements where it's claiming to say that the Lord is the well-wisher of everyone. And Ramachandra is taking a pledge where he's ready to give shelter of everyone. So let's try to maybe see through the pastime of Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, and we will also try to, maybe if time permits, try to talk about some other kind of correlated examples where we can see. So as all of us know, Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya was born in Nadia, and then during his times, as Srila Prabhupada explains in some of his classes, he was a very blessed student, and he had this ability of memorizing anything that he heard once. So during the time of Sarvabhaum, when Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya was very young, so Nadia at that time, when during his young days, was not the capital city of knowledge, but it was the Mithila, where there was this great logician and great teacher of Vedanta who used to teach there. And Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya and a couple of others went there, studied under him, and then they came back and started their own schools, initially in Navadvip, and then later Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya moved into Puri for starting his own schools. So we see that Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya is a student of Vedantis and logician and all time. And if it kind of moving the story forward, then this whole pastime happens where Mahaprabhu comes, and after taking the darshan of Jagannath, he faints, and Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya happens to be there, and he takes Lord Mahaprabhu to his home, makes him take rest, and then Nityananda Prabhu and Gopinath Acharya, Mukunda Datta, all of them come, and then they ask, where is Mahaprabhu? And some people who were there say that he was actually taken to Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya's house. And then once Mahaprabhu wakes up, then there's discussion that happens. And after that, it's interesting, the discussion that happens between Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya and Gopinath Acharya. So Gopinath Acharya, so Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya says that this person is actually a sannyasi, but he needs to be trained under Vedanta, because as a sannyasi, he needs to make sure that he can abide by the principles of Vedanta. And then so I myself will go and teach him. So in saying so, Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, even though he is a Grihastha, he was so confident of his ability and understanding of Vedanta that he wanted to teach a sannyasi who, even in the social customs, is placed in a higher realm than a grostha. So, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Sarvesya cham hridisannivishto matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedescha sarver ahameva vidyo vedanta krit veda videha chaham. So, Krishna says that he is to be known from all the Vedas, but in this case of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, we see that even though he had access of reading the whole Vedanta, like it's, and he's by this time, he is not a very young person. He had his own son who was quite old, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya himself is also quite an aged person. So it's quite a practice and knowledge of Vedanta that he has. But in this case, even after knowing the whole Vedas and Vedanta and being in a position of having that conviction and confidence of teaching it to a young sannyasi, even in that case, he was actually not able to realize that Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, and he was not able to, at least, as Krishna says, that he didn't understand the essence of Vedas. So he was still kind of floating somewhere here and there. And in that context, there is this discussion that happens between Gopinath Acharya, when Gopinath Acharya tries to convince Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, saying that Mahaprabhu himself is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in that, when they say that, Gopinath Acharya says, and the disciples of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya say, that by what evidence do you conclude that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord? And the disciples say, it's interesting what they say. They say that we derive knowledge of the absolute truth by logical hypothesis. So they're not saying they're trying to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by, as Bhagavad Gita says, it's not a surrender and then hearing, but they're trying to understand the absolute truth by logical hypothesis. So they're trying to derive these logical flowcharts and hypotheses and trying to understand. And in their logical viewboard, Mahaprabhu was not fitting in to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then it goes on, and then Gopinath Acharya then claims to say that if one receives but a tiny bit of the Lord's favor by the dint of devotional service, then he can understand the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So immediately Gopinath Acharya is refuting the statement that it is not by the understanding or by the logical hypothesis. Also Gopinath Acharya says that you cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the guesswork or hypothesis. He says that we can only understand by the dint of devotional service. And as we also hear it from the Nectar of Devotion, where it says, Sevon Mikhe Jivado Swayam Evat Spuradhyataha. So even whatever try to, in any ways that we try to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we cannot do. But when we try to do the devotional service, Sevon Mikhe Jivado, so when we try to do the service starting with our tongue, that's when it is revealed to us. Swayam Evat Spuradhyataha. It is revealed within our hearts. And then Gopinath Acharya says, it is not your fault. It is the verdict of the scriptures. You cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by scholarship. So, and it's also, and Krishna also, as says in Bhagavad Gita, Naham Prakashu Sarvasya Yoga Maya Samavrita Mudoyam Nabhijananti Loko Ma Avjam Avyayam. So Krishna, as Gopinath Acharya is also saying here, it is not your fault. It is the verdict of scriptures. You cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by scholarship. And Krishna also says, I'm never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. So as Krishna, it's kind of also saying, he's saying you cannot understand by the scholarship, and Krishna kind of equates that with the foolish and unintelligent. He says, for them, I am uncovered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible. So now, as we all see, so it's not just based on, again, I'm trying to correlate that with the statement of twice born. So in this case, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is a twice born. He's a student. He was born, he's a Bhattacharya. He was born in a Brahminical class of family, and he had access to all the Vedic knowledge that was available. And it's not that he was just accessible. He studied through all of his years of experience. He was very confident with his understanding, but he was still not able to understand not just the essence or anything with respect to what is the actual understanding of the Vedas. So what is it that is required? So if we kind of then go into understanding, then what is required for actually understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead? As Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayantite. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So it is not the understanding of being born as a Brahminical class of family or as a demigod or having to kind of have that scholarship. But what is actually important, as Krishna says, is we can also see that in the case of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that we will discuss in a couple of minutes, is that constant unalloyed devotional service is needed. And also as it is said in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, there are a couple of verses that I was found interesting. Was Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Matihi Kriyatam Yadi Kuto Api Labhyate Tatra Laulyam Api Mulyam Ekalam Janma Kote Sukrite Na Labhyate. Pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be had even by pious activity in hundreds and thousands of lives. It can be attained only by paying one price, that is, intense greed to obtain it. If it is available somewhere, one must purchase it without delay. And then the other verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 20, verse 106, Achirat eva sarvartha siddhyati esham abhipishtita sad dharmasya yava bodhaya yesham nirbandhini matihi. Those who are eager to awaken their spiritual consciousness and who thus have unflinching, undeviated intelligence certainly attain the desired goal of life very soon. So it is not just the understanding or trying to fit in various understandings of the Vedic scriptures and having access or being. It is not about everything, but it is just about the one price that if you are ready to pay, that is intense greed to obtain the lotus feet of Lord. So that is what is actually needed. And if you actually see, take kind of move forward with the pastime of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So there is also just a minute. There is also that thing where after the whole discussion that happens between Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Mahaprabhu, where Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya tries to explain the whole Vedanta philosophy to Vedanta Sutra's philosophy to Mahaprabhu for almost continuously 8 days, and for all those 8 days, Mahaprabhu doesn't even say a word. And later, when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya multiple times requests that what is happening, like I'm not sure if you're actually understanding this whole pastime, like this whole philosophy that I'm trying to explain, and Mahaprabhu then goes on and refutes the whole understanding that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had built in all these years. And then based on the request of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, also explains the explanation of Atmaram verse from Bhagavatam in 8 different ways. And later, Mahaprabhu himself proclaims that the reason why Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya got the mercy and later on went on to become devotee is just because of his connection with Gopinath Acharya. So it is not, so Lord Mahaprabhu was not inspired or impressed with the great understanding that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has, or because of not because it was not that Mahaprabhu was trying to impress Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya because he's the spiritual master of the king of Orissa, so he'll get access, or nothing of that sort. Nothing of that sort. It is just because he was connected to a pure devotee who is Gopinath Acharya, or just because of that connection alone. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya became eligible for getting access to Mahaprabhu, and also that. And just one more point, which was also interesting, was during the whole discussion when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Gopinath Acharya were debating so aggressively about the position of Lord Chaitanya as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and were trying to debate so much. If you actually go through the whole language of how they were discussing, you in no point that we actually see Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami clearly writes that Gopinath Acharya was very displeased with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya when he was trying to present the whole Vedanta philosophy, which is completely against the understanding of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Even in those cases, when both the parties, both Gopinath Acharya and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and his students were debating so aggressively, they never lose that etiquette. Neither Gopinath Acharya and nor Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when he feels that Gopinath Acharya was crossing lines, when he says that you are all the foolish people, or because you do not have that understanding, actually Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says maybe you should actually kind of choose your words carefully. How do you know that you're saying it's okay that you're saying that we never received the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Then how can you confirm that you actually received the mercy? So in all the discussion, it is never a place where Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was feeling himself superior to Gopinath Acharya, nor was he offending Gopinath Acharya. So these were the 2 points which we look back and correlate. One is connection to Gopinath Acharya, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya happened to have that connection. And in credit to him, he always made sure that from the view of Lord Chaitanya, he never lost that connection because he was never offending Gopinath Acharya, in spite of them having two different opposing views on the Vedanta philosophy. So that so even in our case, we might not be born, we might not exactly come into the categories of the twice born, or definitely as of now, I'm sure I don't fall into the category of demigods. But we can take the example of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and have that strong connection with one pure devotee of the Lord, and it will definitely happen, like it happened in the case of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Gopinath Acharya. At some point of the time, we might have completely different opposing views to that devotee, because as we have all seen in our lives, our understanding and our maturity in Krishna consciousness, even though the philosophy is available all through our years, our maturity in Krishna consciousness philosophy and our understanding of the tattva of Krishna keeps maturing day by day as we keep on to it. So there might be times where the views that we have with some of the closest devotees that so the closest devotee friends or anything that we have, sometimes it might be even with our spiritual master, where we might not be kind of not what the spiritual master is presenting, we might not be exactly falling into our bracket of understanding that we have. It could be for whatever cases, it could be because you read somewhere or for whatever reasons. But if we always take the inspiration from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, where we might debate on philosophical points, but let us always make sure that those debates or those discussions, if they always happen on a very respectful, and it might not always obviously happen in a friendly way. Like the whole concept of debating is that there's some kind of argument that is happening. It might not be a friendly argument, but as long as we are keeping it to a very respectful way, with understanding that the other Vaishnava, the other person is also a Vaishnava who is very close to Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it is not. We might have these philosophical differences, but ultimately, kind of understanding that he is my shelter, he or she is my shelter, and then taking it from there. So in that, if we kind of keep it as a constant thing, then as Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has seen in his life, there will be a point where we might also be able to take the shelter and be recipient of the mercy of Mahaprabhu. I'll just take a couple of minutes just to present some of the other things. As we also see, it's not just the case of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, we also actually see many other examples all through our scriptures, where if you see it, there are many devotees who actually do not fall under the category of the twice born cows or demigods or any other bracket that we might actually see within some of the texts that we actually see. And in fact, it's interesting that Vidura himself also doesn't actually fall into that category, because he was born out of a Shudra maidservant mother. And in this case, as Srila Prabhupada explains in the words, he himself has actually read and understood the pastimes of the Lord multiple times. And in fact, he happened to be face to face with Lord Krishna himself, and all those dealings were very devotional and of the highest caliber. It is not just the just the verbal definition of the word twice born cows and demigods. And if you just take different examples, there is Haridas Thakur, and just trying to present examples from various sampradayas and Vaishnavas that we know. There is Haridas Thakur, if you take it from the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and then if you take it from the Madhva, there is Kanakadas. And if you go further into it, then we have Valmiki and then Brugari from Bhagavatam. And if you go into different pastimes of Lord, there is Janabai, there is Tukaram, and if you go back into our Sri Sampradaya, then there is Kanchipurna. And one of the Alvars, out of the 12 Alvars that we have in Sri Sampradaya, Nam Alvar, he was actually born into the Shudra family. So if in all of these cases, all of these are the devotees of the highest caliber, and none of them actually might not technically fall into the definition of the twice born. So, and actually also Srila Prabhupada, once he explains the whole thing of twice born and all of that happens, there's one interesting statement that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport. He says, the whole system of the material creation is planned so that the conditioned souls may have the opportunity for self-realizations. One who takes advantage of such an arrangement is called a demigod or a civilized man. So it's not about being born into those categories or us feeling ourselves part of those categories, but as long as any person, it could be whoever we are, whatever situation we are, if we are able to take the advantage of the opportunity that this material creation provides us for the self-realization, then we can be ourselves called a civilized man, and also take the benefit of all of these pastimes, as gopis also have taken, where all their constant thought of Krishna was just to make sure that how can they please the Lord. So it is not the discrimination that the scriptures that they present, but anything the valuable that we have. And as we also see, I think I'm sure most of us as parents, or we actually see in our lives, where anything that we valuable that we want to present, there is some prize or there is some qualification that we kind of match to something that is valuable. So those things, if we also, and considering getting to hear Srimad Bhagavatam or various stories of pastimes of Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most valuable thing. So how do we not have some level of qualification? It is imperative that if we need to have some level of qualification, and that level of qualification, as he says, is the laulyam, that intense greed to obtain the shelter of the devotees. And how do we obtain the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? As we saw in the example of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he is through our connection with some devotee, that we make sure if we have that connection, then that kind of is something. And with that note, I had a couple of points, but I'm sure we are already overboard, so I'll not go into those points. But on that note, I would definitely like to thank all of you for creating this opportunity where, in spite of our busy times, I'm sure all of us are working men and women, even if there are multiple other responsibilities that all of us all take care. So in spite of all of this, giving this opportunity to hear Srimad Bhagavatam every day in this loving atmosphere, and in all these discussions that happen every day. So thank you so much. And please continue to pray for us, where we can continue to join these discussions. Even if we don't join, then maybe every day keep at it. And at some point, we will also be able to get to that point of able to understand and cherish the Lord's pastimes in the core of our hearts. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyo vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Thank you. If there are any questions or corrections, please feel free to. And I'm sorry I went little 5 minutes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept
Hare Krishna Mataji.
all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Always
Thank
wish you
you so
luck.
much, Prabhu. You have brought many beautiful, instructive points. Personally, for me, it was so amazing to hear Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's topic, because I'm so inspired every time I hear about him, because he represents that extreme mentality of philosophical speculation and whatnot, scholarship, pride. But in spite of that, he was able to get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. So that gives me so much hope every time I hear. And the way you brought up and the connection you made, how it was possible because of the connection to the devotees. And the other key aspect you made there, respect towards the devotees. We can disagree, but that respect has to be there. Of course, you are bringing from the perspective of the philosophical differences, but I'm actually taking it more generic. Even though we may have differences in the kind, in the way that we want to do certain services or whatnot, that respect, if it is
Yeah.
at the center of our interactions, it's so amazing the way you very beautifully described that this devotee is very dear to the Lord. And, we can only imagine we are like so aspiring to somehow or other become a teeny tiny servant of the Lord. And here is a person very dear to the Lord.
Mm.
And how am I supposed to treat them? How am I supposed to interact with them? We may not be able to see right now, but as we were discussing this topic, Vrindavan Prabhu was mentioning on Saturday's class, we never know who the other devotee would be in the
Yeah.
future. They may become like the, not just in terms of the external material elevations, but in a spiritually much deeper connected to the Lord. So, I mean, not in terms of just, oh, what will happen to me? Not in that respect, but really, genuinely cultivating that respect towards each other, even when things are going whatever. So that point was very nicely coming. Yeah, the whole discussion, as you have brought up, it's very beautiful. The gratitude and the connection. Yeah, it's very nice, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Actually, it reminded me of a story that Garam Prabhu once told. Um, when Dhruva, when what it's not Suneti, Suruchi, when Suruchi actually offended Dhruva, he was not a pure devotee, but later he went on, and then like both Suruchi and um, her son actually had to take the effects of the offense that they committed to Dhruva Maharaj even before he got the shelter of Lord. So, as you said, we never know. It's always better to be careful, and not just from that standpoint, but as you also said, it's always better to respect everyone, irrespective of their devotees or not. So, if they are devotees, they obviously require a lot more respect just for the sheer dedication that they have for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very interesting. He wasn't a pure devotee at that time, but they had
Yeah.
different. Yeah, at this point, we were actually, I mean, contemplating on this furthermore. Lila Prabhu brought it. Like initially, we have so much respect for the devotees, but as we continue to associate only with the devotees and continue to practice devotional service, somehow that respect gradually, starts dwindling. So, as you have brought up, I mean, devotional service is not easy. Krishna says it's the rarest of the rarest of the rare. And these devotees who are around us, including us, even though we are struggling, even though we have so many weaknesses, we are way above general public. So how much
Yeah.
respect really, kind of almost entitled. I'm not talking about ourselves, but the other devotees. So I think once in a while we have to step out of our position and see the big picture, like who are these people I'm with?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
it can evoke that gratitude, that how is it possible that I got this opportunity to interact with these devotees, each of them amazing congregation we have here, amazing devotees. So I think a little bit stepping out and then seeing through that lens can actually bring that respect and gratitude.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu, for bringing that point very nicely.
Thank you. If no other points, we can end here. Thank you, Lakshmikant Prabhu, once again for this opportunity. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So much.